I think it's helpful. I applaud the Europeans. I think the British, the French, and the Germans and the Polish are really leading the way. They are absolutely essential to fixing this. And, they are willing to put boots on the ground, but that's very tricky and very troublesome because, as I mentioned, I think a spokesman from the Kremlin made no bones about it, that any soldier from a NATO country will on Ukrainian soil or fighting against Russian soldiers will be considered an act of war by Ukraine, by NATO. And so it's tricky, it's dangerous, and but they're talking it up. They're willing to do it. But I think at the end of the day, the most powerful man in the world, Trump, has to understand he's dealing with someone that has to be crippled because you can't reason, you can't appease. He wants it all, and he Trump has to get this. He has to understand this
I mean, do you
because
think
he's
it's
the one.
is it really a question of misunderstanding or unwillingness?
I hope it's not willingness. I hope it's not willingness. No, I think it's just plain ignorance. I don't think he reads history. I don't think he studied history. He doesn't know anything about it. I mean, I recently also came across an open letter by Edward Topol, who's a Russian expert novelist, historian, artist. And he said, look, you don't understand. Putin has to keep the war going. He has to, because every time Russia has withdrawn from an unsuccessful war, there has been a revolution and an overthrow of the government. So he absolutely has a rational reason to continue this war, Putin. And as he does, he's gaining, I guess, this and that from it. But if you don't understand that you're dealing with someone who has a suicide vest on and an arsenal of weaponry and wants to kill you, you don't sit down and chat with them. You don't. You don't offer them enticements. You don't offer them appeasement or bribes. You have to fight them.
Can you tell me a bit more? I mean, you wrote about this in your Substack. Can you tell me a bit more about the reasoning of this point of view?
Yeah, it was an interesting story. It was Edward Topol, and he's a Russian and he's an expert. And he said, look, every war in the history of Russia up until Afghanistan, which was in 91 or so, every war that the Russians have lost, when the troops come home, there's an overthrow, there's a revolution. And the last one was they walked out of Afghanistan after losing, as many people as proportionally as they're losing in Ukraine. They walked away from it. And he explained, he said, now you bring back a couple of million soldiers who are now expert at killing and mugging and raping and looting, and they don't want to just go back to nothing. And so that's when you get the revolution starting, usually from disgruntled leaders who have disgruntled soldiers of a certain size. And so he said, this is what is going to happen. And Putin knows the history. If he comes back, he can't whitewash that he didn't get all of Ukraine after saying he wanted all of Ukraine. And that will constitute a defeat. And that will mean the re-emergence of all the soldiers will return. And they will have done all of that for nothing. And they're going to be angry. And he's going to lose power and possibly his life. And so Topol said he can't stop. And that's another reason why, the Americans have to get real and smarten up and understand that they've got it. They can't negotiate a deal. They've got to defeat Russia.
So you think the meeting in Alaska was a mistake, a big mistake, was it?
The meeting in Alaska was a mistake. And the meeting in Washington was an important show of solidarity on the part of Europe and the United States. So in that sense, it was very important. But as far as leading to a trilateral or anything consequential, I really think the boots on the ground thing has been kiboshed by the statement from the Kremlin that, you don't dare do that because now you're going to start the big one. And that, of course, has to give people pause.
And not only that, if, as you say, Putin wants and has to keep the war going, there is going to be no ceasefire. There is going to be no international military deployment of the likes that are being discussed at the moment. So this is all a distraction.
He's playing along with it because he can continue his war. He hasn't stopped the war. He's bombing the heck out of Ukraine as people are talking and greeting him in on the red carpet and whatever else. He's his murderous trail continues, and so it's really tragic that we're at a point where the leader of the free world, if you like, Trump, is totally naive and not well-meaning, just naive, just and absolutely ignorant of history, and he has done no homework on who he's up against. If he thinks that Putin has a shred of decency and or a shred of greed that will get him to somehow stop this for a price, he's dead wrong. And why everybody else knows that and he doesn't, I don't get it.
Is part of the problem, or is actually the concrete thing that has come out of this flurry of diplomatic activity is that actually it has crystallized and made very clear the two different paths and approaches that the US and Europe have towards this war at the moment. They really are on different tracks.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. But I think that there's a couple of things that everybody agrees to. And Germany led it by writing a check. Europeans are saying, okay, we get it. You put a lot of money into this. This is our immediate region. It's our problem. And they're paying for all the American weaponry that Ukraine needs at the moment, 90 billion, I think, recently. And so that has got to continue. They have got to buy as much weaponry as Ukraine can possibly utilize to try and stall or stop the onslaught from Putin. And then the other thing is Lindsey Graham's crippling sanctions against oil customers. That has to happen. I mean, why did he put 25% oil tariff, Trump, on India and nothing on China? And it makes no sense. And he hasn't applied those sanctions on anyone else. I mean, okay, it would be disruptive. Turkey wouldn't be happy. Brazil wouldn't be happy. South Africa wouldn't. But we're talking about a man who's out to destroy and conquer the world. And so I think that, you've just got to pull the pin on it. Got to pull the pin on it. I don't know what that will take.
And a man who's also out to get President Zelensky and President Putin to meet. Do you think that is going to happen?
I don't think, look, I don't think it would do any good even if it did. I think Putin thinks Zelensky's beneath him. I don't think he'd meet one-on-one with him because of that. And I think it's very dangerous for Trump to think he can get these two guys in a room and work it all out between them when one is desperately being bombed and assailed by the other, and without any kind of hope that this will stop. So we're in a really difficult place unless and until the Europeans finally get through to Trump that they've all got to get real about this. And that includes, by the way, Europe has been buying Russian oil and gas. Some European countries have been buying Russian oil and gas throughout this whole piece. And so, they haven't been exactly smart about it either. So I can't, I'm starting to repeat myself, but, we're at a brick wall. I'm afraid we're at a brick wall.
So what are your friends in Ukraine telling you about all of this?
Well, they're disappointed, beyond disappointed. They're being bombed. It's horrific. I mean, I have friends that spend as much time in a bomb shelter as they do above ground. The people in the countryside seem to be unaffected, except that everybody's lost a relative or a friend. I had a woman give me a facial in Toronto the other day. I said, who's in the army? She said, my granddad. I said, your grandfather. How old is he? She said, he's 65. He's there. He's a cook. He's a cook at the front line. He's getting the food to the troops. And he's too old and his back is bad, so he hasn't got a gun. I mean, this is the level of suffering and despair and tragedy that's going on in that country, and without any provocation at all. So, it's just, that's what's going on.
You said earlier that Putin has to keep the war going. Is there a scenario whereby he would accept to end it if it means a capitulation of Ukraine and he gets what he wants, or Zelensky were to be forced into that kind of position? Do you think then he would be willing to talk and to implement a ceasefire?
I don't think so. I think he has to be brought to his knees. I think he has to be, or pushed out of power somehow. But his foreign secretary Lavrov, on the 19th of August, amid all these meetings, came out bluntly and said, "Hey, you just don't understand. We want all of Ukraine. It's not about a little sliver of Donetsk. Ukraine is Russian. Ukrainian people and their culture is a fraud. It belongs to us. We want it all." And he said that, the chief diplomat, amid all this diplomacy. So, why is no one listening to this? And you say, well, we'll never change their minds. But what you can do is you can bring them to their knees economically and militarily, much more so than has been done.
You've been watching Frontline for Times Radio. If you'd like to know more about the war in Ukraine, you can subscribe and sign up for a membership. You can also get more analysis by listening to Times Radio or read thetimes.com. But for now, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.